So my name is Dan Hodges. I'm founder of the Consumers in Motion. One of our brands is World Retail Forum. We started Retail Forum to actually help connect the world so that we can all sort of be in touch with each other and share best practices. We did that. We actually did this. We launched in February, and we have about, I think, 60 programs on our website that you can look at or listen to the podcast. It's a lot of fun. Also joining us is David Roth, who is the CEO of The Store, which is a WPP company, and also chairman of Brand Z. And for those of you who don't know David, he actually wrote the book on retail, or at least actually not even one book, but two books. So anyway, it's rare that you can say that and actually hold up a book. So we're very grateful to have David as well.
Pleasure.
And then Joe is the VP of Internet of Things at Intel. Intel provides the core technology by which runs most of the world. And so we're happy to have Joe here. And so just a quick introduction, and we're going to get right into it. 2020, we're all happy to say goodbye to 2020. A lot's happened. The one lesson that we learned about, I think, 2020 is the need to connect with each other, with supply chains, with IT infrastructure, with customer journey tech. If you weren't completely connected, you learned how to get connected quickly in 2020. As we look to 2021, how do you pandemic-proof your business? Well, we developed an acronym, which is called SHIFT, and it's about safety and sustainability. It's about the human connection. It's about Internet of Things. It's about being fast to market and also being able to transform yourselves. So we're going to start with David. And so what I want to do is that, when David and I spoke, we said, well, gee, we're glad we made it through, but the pace of change has really improved. And so one of the things that we have to ask your employees now is you have your COVID-19 test before you come to work. So I wonder if you might talk about the importance of safety, David, and sustainability, because because of the COVID-19, we haven't really talked about sustainability that much in business. But it's very, very important, and it's one of the fundamental decision points when people are buying things today. So I'll leave it to you, David.
Sure. Well, thank you very much indeed, Dan. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks very much indeed for everybody watching. It's always a pleasure to be with JoeJensen, someone who I have an amazing amount of respect and admiration for. I think one of the things that's really interesting to me over, looking back, it's almost an entire year now, so that's deeply worrying in its own. That a lot of things that we as consumers and retailers did behind the scenes now need to be unbelievably visible. I'm an ex-retailer. We had all sorts of discussions about how to make sure that things that were done in order to make the stores better from an operational perspective were done in absence of the consumer seeing it, not interrupt their flow of wandering around the stores and having an experience. And in a sense, safety was one of those. All the store cleaning was done out of hours. And now the consumer themselves wants to see stores actively doing things to improve the safety not only of the store staff, but also of the consumers who are wandering in the stores. So, your cleaning routine now needs to be unbelievably visible. It needs to be significantly more frequent as well. And I do think there's an interesting role, I think, for many large brands to actually have a sort of a safety sub-brand. How many people before COVID ever thought about parcels going from point A to your home? How many people touched them? How many people looked at them? We weren't concerned about that. But now all of a sudden, the chain of custody of the people who've touched things across the supply chain suddenly becomes very important to us as consumers. So I think there's an interesting proposition there for a safe and secure supply chain. Now, I think you made a really interesting point in terms of sustainability, because you could be forgiven for thinking that during this COVID period that we've all been enduring, sustainability would have fallen off the agenda, certainly of consumers. Now, more important things to worry about, safety for one of those. But what we have seen is that sustainability hasn't fallen off the agenda at all. In fact, it's got more important to many, many consumers in many different sectors, because they're thinking, one of the issues of pandemics is, a secure and sustainable way in which society needs to live. And I think we've all, during the dark days of the deepest lockdowns, sadly in the UK, many other countries around the world, we seem to be going back to that as opposed to out of it. You have time to think about these things. And the way in which the world has operated and the way in which I think the disadvantaged around the world haven't really had a fair crack of the value that globalization has brought to many of us, myself included. Those issues are becoming more important. Now, what we see in the Brands Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands is that those brands that are seen by their consumers, not necessarily theirs, but general consumers, as being sustainable in one form or another, doing things that are actively good for the sustainability of the planet, have grown in their value at a substantially higher rate than those brands that aren't. So I think it was always true, it is true today, and it will be true when we come out of the pandemic, that having a business that is sustainable, that cares about the impact that it's having within the environment, is something that the consumers highly rate. And doing good is undoubtedly good business as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments on safety and sustainability. So I want to maybe talk about the human connection, David, and then let's talk about something that's very personal, and it's the wedding. The wedding.
That looks an expensive place to visit.
It is. So in the US, there are about 2.3 million people that get married every year. The average wedding is around $45,000. So it's the second biggest purchase apart from a home. In the case of Tiffany, when the engagement ring process, there were 10 trips to the store. The first 2 trips are with the bride-to-be and her mom or close girlfriend. The third is with the groom. And then the 9th and 10th trip are with the groom. And they're basically 10 trips across about a year in the purchase of a ring. If we look at the implications of that, so there are 2.3 million people that maybe they got the ring or maybe they didn't get the ring, and who will be postponing their weddings to sometime in 2022. How that impacts is that there are 350 million people who go to weddings every year, which is bigger than all the sports in the United States by far. So this particular, so if you are, advising Tiffany, David, and as we're going into 2021, how might you think about talking to them about maybe the new customer journey versus the former customer journey?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting analogy, I think, Dan, because I think that store looks to me very much like the Fifth Avenue store. It might be incorrect, but
Yep.
Tiffany's must have been about a couple of years ago, because I actually was in New York at that time when they literally shut the doors to that store and moved literally around the corner as this store is being revamped. And I think that's a 3 or 3.5 year program to do that. And I think it would be a criminal shame if Tiffany's didn't make some changes to the plans that they obviously are in the middle of executing to what this store is now going to look like when it opens its doors clearly in a post-COVID environment. If they just stuck to the blueprint that they'd obviously signed off 3.5 years ago, I think they're missing a massive, great big trick and opportunity, because the world has changed and consumers have changed. Now, all of us, myself included, are fascinated and are looking at trends and speaking to consumers in looking at their data to find out which of their changes in behaviours are really going to stick once a vaccine is universal, and which ones are going to sort of snap back to the way in which the customer journeys happened before that. And of course, nobody really knows. But I think that we can say with some degree of certainty, maybe a Donald Rumsfeldism, there's some known unknowns in all of this, which is consumers have tried, experimented with doing things digitally because they've had to. And by and large, the experiences has been pretty good. And I think we are, as retailers, as marketeers, going to have to now give consumers a really good reason to shop out as opposed to shop in. And the trade-off, I think, is going to be very interesting because we've been used to sort of searching for things digitally. Some of that consumer journey you talked about, of the 10 journeys, maybe 8 or 9 of those physically people went into Tiffany's and have a look at. But I think today and in a post-COVID world, maybe 5 of those, maybe more, but maybe 5 of those are going to be absolutely virtual journeys. There'll still be those types of journeys. It's a big investment. It has a lot of emotional things surrounding it. And some of those emotional aspects of it are intrinsically part of the buyer behavioral decision-making process. And I think those will want to be done in a physical way. I'm not of the school that says physical retailing is in an exorable decline. But I think now it's the balance of what's done virtually and what's done physically. Now, I think the last time I went to Tiffany's, I think the day before they closed the door, I went to the restaurant on, I think it must have been the 5th or the 5th floor, I think it was. As a Brit, you've got to have breakfast in Tiffany's. And it was a fantastic experience. But, I might rip out that cafe, actually, and actually put in a live streaming studio on that 5th floor, because I think more and more the interactions that can be had in a digital sort of way, and live streaming is a good example. Live streaming doesn't have to be one to many. Live streaming could be a very personal one-on-one relationship, maybe with the artisan who actually cut the diamond. I mean, one of the wonderful things about Tiffany's, I was very privileged, as it happens, to be able to go behind the stage in Tiffany's, which I didn't realize. There is an army of artisan craftsmen who've been working at Tiffany's for 20, 30 years. Their fathers and their mothers worked there, artisan craftsmen, that are physically making, cutting, designing the jewelry. And to have a conversation with somebody who's cut your diamond, to tell you the story about where that diamond came from, why he or she cut it in that particular way, I think it's something that could be an amazingly personal and emotional relationship, but done, via technology in one form or another. I think there are ways that you can make the physical journey, and I think this is something that all retailers are going to have to think about. How do you make that physical trip to the store a rewarding experience? And a rewarding experience doesn't have to be a highly emotionally charged one. A rewarding experience could be just the functionality of walking in and out of the store, getting what you need in the shortest possible time available. Removing every single element of friction that was there in the process beforehand. So, that's what I would do. Relook, remap that customer journey, understand what's actually better for the customer and maybe even for you to see if that can be done in a virtual way as opposed to a physical way, and make that physical interaction really, really count. The emotional aspects is the thing that you can't replicate via technology. The emotional aspects are the things that competitors find it very, very difficult to compete against you. And that is going to be the difference, I think, between those brands that muddle through the next few years and those brands that thrive.
I think that's very, very insightful. And yeah, so thank you very much. It's a good example, Tiffany. Everybody loves that store. So Joe, the area of expertise at Intel for the past decade has been Internet of Things. And one of the lessons of COVID that people learn, like it or not, is that if your supply chain, if you're not connected to your customers, it's going to have a direct impact on your business today. And so how should we think about Internet of Things and understanding it, understanding the roadmap, and just facing up to sort of the new facts of retail?
I think what I would say to start is the Internet of Things, if you think about it as technology and you come at it from a technology lens, it's easy to get wrapped around the axle on all the different things that you might want to think about and consider. A much better way to come at, how would IoT help is, what are you trying to improve? What are you trying to change? How are you trying to address your customer journey? What are the business problems that you need to focus on to optimize your cost or to optimize your inventory accuracy or things like that? And think about the problems and then realize that technology is on this endless loop of cheaper, 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 and more and more and more sophisticated. And insights that would have been nearly impossible to garner, 10 years ago, are now affordable, easy, and ubiquitous if you want to deploy them. Simple things like if you have a digital menu board or you've got a kiosk in a fast food restaurant, use a camera and anonymous analytics, not identifying the person, but just some attributes about the shopper. How old are they? What age do we think they are? What gender do we think they are? And based on people that looked like that anonymously in the past, what things they were tending to lean towards, show that shopper those things on the easiest to see user screen. It's going to do a couple of things. One, it'll be more relevant to that consumer because you'll see things that'll be easier to find what you're looking for. And two, you have a better chance of selling them, increasing the cart, or a little bit of an upsell. If you look at it and peel it back, the restaurant, they're not saying, how do I use IoT to increase my sales? What they should be saying is, how do I increase the satisfaction of my shopper or my consumer, and how do I increase the cart? And those are the kind of problems that you should be looking at. I think if you look at David's example, one of the biggest problems I think for brick and mortar retail we see is they still think of the shopper journey as a linear path and a funnel, the way it used to be. And I would say I think today nearly all shopper journeys start online, almost 100%, and they're started in the social world. And so if you're not thinking about that, and again, using that engagement, so somebody like a Tiffany's would be very easy as they engage their consumer in an online with a compelling online experience, you can learn some stuff about that shopper. And that shopper journey, when you do get them in the store, and you're going to want them in the store, they're going to want to see a purchase like a diamond, they're going to want to see it in person. Different people are different. I'm an engineer, super analytical. I like lots of data. If you could look at my behavior on your online site, you're going to know what kind of shopper I am. And your staff could tailor their experience for me to one that's going to give me what I'm looking for without me asking for it. Other shoppers have different profiles. And so it'd be really easy if you were, again, thinking about this journey as I'm going to engage initially online, I'm going to learn as much as I can about online, and I'm going to arm my associates with the ability to kind of take that understanding of what I like and don't like and use it to tailor that experience automatically. And so it's this, I think the reality is conversion is going to happen a lot in the physical store. Consumers like to shop. Shopping is a pastime, and not a pastime like, hey, I'm killing time. Shopping is something people like to do. 60% of sales in stores are for things people didn't know they were going to buy when they went to the store. So there's a tremendous amount of real-time demand created in the store. The challenge is consumers want to interact differently than they used to. They want to know the origin of products. They want to understand the sustainability aspects that David talked a bit about. There's more data and information that they expect to have. And if you can't serve it up to them in an easy way in the store, they'll go to places where they can. And we don't think they're going to go online. We think what's going to happen is the stores that embrace this new consumer will implement these capabilities, and the shoppers will gravitate to those stores because that's where they get the experience they're looking for.
So there are 12 icons around that hand. And to me, what you're saying is, so it's interesting. So if we look at those 12 icons as 12 eyes, and if you had 12 eyes in the pandemic, you'd see more than if you had 11 eyes. So the analytics part of it is the more that you're deployed, let's say call these icons the 7 eyes or the 12 eyes, the more you'll be able to understand what's working or not working. And the fewer eyes you have, the less you'll be taking in, and less your view of the world will be somewhat limited than the company that has like 12 eyes. Is that a valid analogy?
Yeah, I think it may be a way to maybe bring it a little closer to home is, I think we've all had experiences with amazing staff in a store, and we've had lots of experiences with mediocre staff. And no retailer wants a mediocre experience for a shopper. We don't see technology replacing staff. We don't think physical retail goes away. We think it's going to radically change. And why not have 12 eyes getting information to enable the staff to all perform as well as the most amazing staff? Years ago, my wife went to a well-known department store that's known for service, intending to buy a couple shirts. And we had probably been in that store hundreds of times over 20 years. She ended up with the most amazing staff person. And my wife ended up buying, and she doesn't buy a lot, she bought 10 different tops. And it was absolutely amazing. And the insight this lady was able to give my wife on what worked, what didn't work, what fit, and it was amazing. And I thought to myself, that's what that chain is aspiring to have every experience be. And how could we as a technology company enable them to equip all of their staff to give that level of experience? And to me, this is the way that we should be thinking about digital and retail. What is the strategy we have as a company? Digital shouldn't just be, some guys in a lab, building some innovation projects. Digital now needs to be deeply rooted in who is my consumer, how is their journey changed, how do they expect to be interacted with, and how is that a core part of my strategy? I would.
Joe, do you also think that the other side of that particular coin is, which you also need to be able to digitize your entire supply chain to get the real benefit of both of those.
It's so important. One of the we've been having a narrative the last couple of years that we think shopping is going to really bifurcate into two different styles for consumer. There's going to be I want the most convenient way possible, zero friction, zero hassle. And then the other end of the spectrum is I want amazing experience. And rooted in the foundation of both of those is if I go to a store, they better not be out of stock. If I can't find what I'm looking for, it's really hard to have a great experience. We saw a study a few years ago that looked at endless aisle, and a shopper would go to a department store, look for a shirt or an item of clothing, can't find it. Staff comes over very helpfully and cheerfully. They look through the same rack you just looked through. They can't find it. They go in the back, take a look at the back stock. Then they jump on the computer and they check on the POS. Does another store have it? And then they offer to ship it to you. That endless aisle concept was a big thing 5-6 years ago. 1% of shoppers that can't find what they're looking for go through that whole journey, because it's probably a 15-20 minute journey while you're waiting for them to dig around the back stock, look on the computer, fill out your name and address, et cetera, et cetera. That is not a great experience. We don't think the shoppers of today will look at that experience and say, hey, this was amazing. I'm going to go do that again. And so, this ability to create real-time demand is amazing. But if you're creating demand in the store for things people can't buy, it goes from, an amazing experience to a dissatisfaction.
And these are all sort of tenets of pandemic proofing your business, having, in this case, called the 12 eyes for this conversation. But also importantly, attention spans have decreased. And so there was a study done by a German supermarket where they actually increased the ability to navigate the store. And they were spending 25% less in the store time, which is maybe not a good thing, but they ended up spending 50% more. Revenue went up 15%. So it's not, they found things more efficiently and bought more of them. So maybe it's, when your wife is.
That's a great example. I talk about this one a lot. And I think that the old adage, was that the longer people spend in the store, the more they buy. So let's build the stores to kind of trick them into spending more time in the store. That's not how today's consumers look at things. And, I've always thought that there was a confusion in cause and effect. Maybe they spent more time in the store because they had a longer shopping list. And what was the real reason they spent time in the store? And I talk to grocery chains all the time and say, everybody puts the staples in the back. to try to get the shopper to walk through the whole store to add some more stuff to the basket. And perhaps you ought to take your house brands and put the staple house brands up front and make them hyper convenient and mark them up 20%. And there's a shopper, you know, it's amazing. One of the interesting data points is a ton of convenience stores in the US sell a ton of milk. And most people think, well, why the heck would you buy a gallon of milk at a convenience store for $5 when you can get it for $2.50 at the grocery store? It's because it's convenient.
Right.
And you know, it's the, I need a gallon of milk on the way home from work, you know, stop. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if the grocery chain could capture that business instead of, you know, selling milk at 3 points of margin. So, you know, I think that there's this notion that convenience and friction are such a key factor moving forward. And then with the pandemic, as shoppers have gone more and more online, more and more, you know, hey, I want the store to pull the items for me and drop them in my trunk. We had, you know, low single-digit percentages of shoppers in the U.S. using that prior to the pandemic. And, you know, we've had up to 30% in some cities using those services. A lot of people that maybe never would have tried it are now using it and will stick with it. And that's a big problem for grocers. We talked to one chain and they said, if you have them bag it and pick it and bag it and put it in your trunk, it costs them $5 typically for an order. And if you have it delivered, it costs them $15. And they're not adding that to the bill. And so that's something that, you know, grocers are going to have to figure out, you know, how do they find a way to deliver efficiency to be able to enable that new consumer expectation. You're
right, Joe. And let me just, for the next slide, basically, maybe this talks about your point, which is fast, because the pandemic was relentless. Companies throughout the world said something like this story is a generic story. We're planning to do this, our digital conversion in next year. We had 3 months allocated to it. We did it over the weekend. So, you know, speed is critical, but you can only be fast if you know what's going on. And using the 12-eye analogy again, because you know what's going fast. So for the two of you, what as we look into 2021, which is just, we can almost see it right now. How should we, you know, Dr. Roth, Dr. Jensen, what's our advice for our patients and or our associates who are on the call today in terms of what, you know, okay, we got through, hopefully we most of it got through. How do we think about 2021? What should we be doing and how fast should we be doing it?
Well, I think for those retailers that have survived into 2021, I think we should all pat themselves on the back, or they should metaphorically pat themselves, and we should pat them on the back, if we're allowed to touch them, I suppose, because that is no mean feat. That is hard work, hard graft, making difficult, painful decisions, re-engineering the business, thinking forward. And I hope that they all have a very good Christmas Day if they celebrate it, and New Year's Day. But I think that's the only 2 days you can really switch off, because the pace of change in the next year is going to be different, but it is going to be at that same sort of speed. And I think there are two really interesting things. One of them is the consumer has become faster, and the consumer is willing now to try new things that they weren't necessarily prepared to try a year ago. And that means that if you don't provide what they're looking for, they're very happy to switch to somebody else that does, either physically or digitally. And the second thing, and you allude to it in your slide in terms of speed, we've all learned that speed of action is of paramount importance. And I think now the mantra should be, it's better to be 80% right and fast than 100% right and never. I think we've all sat on transformation committees and project plan committees for various different strategic initiatives in our organizations that have gone on forever and that have never really delivered a particularly great result. But I think now for next year, it's about absolute razor sharp focus. It's about, Joe makes a really interesting point about the amount of investment that companies have made especially retailers over the last few years on technology. It hasn't been enough. They are going to have to put their foot on the accelerator in terms of their technology investments in order to meet the new demands, and I say demands very, very purposely, new demands of a new generation of consumers. And I talk about a generation in terms of a generation that has experienced COVID in its various different forms. Retailers are going to have to gear themselves up for another Herculean year of change and disruption. And of course, most retailers are also going to have to work very hard to drive significant efficiencies within the business, because it's unlikely that most retailers will make as much money in 2021 as they made in 2019. The way in which one's going to have to operate the business to ensure profitability, to ensure you have the ability to invest in this new technology and new ways of doing it, and being able to have a seamless transition between what you do online and what you do offline. The money has got to come from somewhere, and the business needs to be lean and fast in order to do that. It's never been easy to be a retailer. If you want to be a retailer, you want a quiet life, absolutely don't become a retailer, that's for sure. But the wonderful thing about retailing is it's full of fantastic entrepreneurs who love, the successful ones who love product, who really get and understand their consumers, and who can give them what they want. The graveyard of retail is littered with retailers who took their eye off the ball in terms of what the consumer wanted, who didn't invest in new technologies and new things to satisfy the demand, and who quickly saw that consumers went and frequented other places. So I think there is a good future for retailers in that former category, and have a good few days rest from, the doctor says rest over Christmas and New Year, but get back to your desk January the 2nd and go for it.
Right. It's true. Thank you very much, David. That was a wonderful answer. Joe, how about your thoughts as we
probably a couple quick points. One of them, early in my career, I picked up a quote that I've really held on to, and that's change breeds opportunity. And I think our founder at Intel, Andy Grove, he was really famous for the strategic inflection point concept. Retail's been in the midst of a transformation for 10 years, probably really heavily for 5 years. And all the time in retail, I hear about people complaining about online retailers and the challenge that online retailers are putting on brick and mortar. Amazon's killing brick and mortar, that kind of narrative. And we think that's completely inverted. The reality is consumers are changing how they want to shop and interact, and online has been way more nimble. Online comes from a line of, let me study exquisitely how the consumer is interacting with me, and let me adapt dynamically all the time how I engage that. And what you're going to see moving forward as we come through the washout of pandemic, we think you're going to see big retail brands be taken over by online retail. You're going to see a huge injection of this digital thinking in leadership and executives into retail. So retailers, as they get into trouble, you'll see turnover in leadership teams. And you're going to have a lot more of digital thinking coming into brick and mortar. And what we're seeing all the time is companies that are online as their start, online only brands moving into brick and mortar. We don't spend any time trying to convince them why they need to use data and analytics. They come to us with a shopping list of all the insights they need to get, and they ask for our help on getting them. And I think that, if you don't quite understand it, when travel lifts, go to China. What you're going to see in retail in China is the cutting edge of retail. Consumer patience there is zero for friction. Expectations are incredibly high, and you see an amazing integration of digital and physical. And I think that's where consumers globally are headed.
Well put. Well, thank you very much. As we said, David, this could go on for 3 hours, this conversation, but we only have 30 minutes. So thank you very much. any questions from I don't see any questions, so that's a good, thorough, well thought through panel. So thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Joe.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
Good to
and
see you.
happy New Year to all involved. And as you say, David, we should take your advice and take a week off, but then come back January and ready to do all the transformation we need. So thank you, Joe, and thank you, David. Very, very good session.
Thank you, and
Thanks,
a
everybody.
good New Year to everybody.
Have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful day. Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye-bye.